You feel depressed yet? We're just starting. We're not going to read everything here, but we're going to take a look at a few things that he had to say. And some of the things he's saying that in verse 13 of chapter 1, he says, I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. And he says, it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after the wind, or a chasing after the wind is the way that's translated in some translations. I like the idea of chasing after the wind. It gives me I think means more to me than the word striving after wind. So he's taking a look, and it looks to me like he's just stopping and looking at life. And he's saying, man, it's just, what is it all about? It looks useless to me. And he goes on, and he talks about a lot of the different things that he tried in his life to find meaning in life. To find, meaning would be a good word, purpose, meaning. He tried wisdom, attaining great wisdom. He said he had acquired great wisdom. In fact, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. So he had great wisdom. He tried pleasure, all kinds of pleasure, and we'll look at some of that. He tried doing great works, things that other people hadn't been able to attain as far as works go, building things and things like that, beautiful things, great things. He tried possessions. He says great possessions. He had a lot of wealth. He had a lot of wives and concubines. He tried focusing on greatness. All kinds of self-indulgence is what he was focused on in trying to find meaning, happiness, purpose in life, a reason for doing what he was doing. I'm going to read maybe all of chapter 2. Gives us a big overview of a lot of the things that I just got done talking about. He said, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. This is after he had just gotten talking about wisdom. He said, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. For behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses, planted vineyards for myself, and made myself gardens and parks, and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. He was doing a lot. I also gathered for myself silver and gold, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the children of man. So I became great. Now he had become great. Isn't that what we're all striving for? To become great? Is that what you're working for? To become great? So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. So basically his toil was the reward for all his toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, guess what? All was vanity, and again a chasing after wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly. So there was something there. As there is more gain in light than in darkness, the wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Oh man, I thought we had some hope here. He was seeing a difference between wisdom and folly, but then he says, yeah, the same thing still happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? Why did I put forth all that effort to be wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life. Have you ever been there? Have you ever hated life? That's where he was. He says, I hated life. I don't know if I've ever hated life. There's been times when I was disenfranchised with much of life and maybe getting towards hating life. I don't think I've ever been to the place where I would have said I hated life. Because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and again chasing after wind. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a man who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to the one who pleases God. This also is vanity and, again, chasing after wind. So every time we start seeing a little glimmer of hope that maybe there is something to life, again he comes back and says, we're still chasing wind. And he goes on and he talks about in chapter 3 how there's a time to be born and a time to die, a time for all these different things. And then he says, what gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. And again, he's not seeing a lot of good there. He sees in verse 16 of chapter 3, in the place of justice, there's wickedness, and he becomes more depressed. And in the place of righteousness, even, there's wickedness. He sees, as he's continuing on from there into chapter 4, talking about all the oppressions under the sun. So many people who said, behold the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. And I thought the dead who are already dead more fortunate than the living who are still alive. And then this is an interesting statement. He says, but better than both is he who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. Then I saw that all toil and all skill and work come from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and is striving after wind. And he goes on and he talks about things like there's no end. When we have that approach to life, there's no end to it. There's no end to just the constant striving for something and coming up empty. He says his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so he never asks, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? And I think there's a key to the secret of finding meaning in life. In that statement, he says, the person is never asking, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? Jumping down to chapter 5 in verse 10, it says, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity." If we go to the end of the chapter, the end of the book of Ecclesiastes. Another interesting verse that stands out to me in chapter 11 in verse 5, it says, "As you do not know the way the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything." Keep that in the back of your mind. After all this, he comes to the end of the book. I'm going to read from verse 9 of chapter 12 to the end. It says, "Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with great care. The preacher sought to find words of delight, and uprightly he wrote words of truth. The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. My son, be aware of anything beyond these, of making many books there is no end, and of much study is a weariness of the flesh." The end of the matter, all has been heard. So he's saying, I've done all this looking, I've listened to everything, I've looked at everything, and here's the end of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Now, how does that help? How does that help in finding the meaning of life? It says, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. How can being afraid of God and having to do what he tells us to do help us out with all this meaningless of life? It says, for God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. So where are you in all of this? That's my question. Where are you in all of this? What is your life about? What has your life been about? I think it's good for us to stop and think about life and what it is all about. And what we're expending our energy being about. Because I don't want to end up at the end of my life, looking back over my life and being at this place saying, I've worked so hard. I've spent all this time and all this energy, all this passion on all these things. What good is it? It's meaningless. It's worthless. I've been chasing wind. I don't want to be there. Verse 11 of chapter 3, there's a profound statement there. He has made everything beautiful in its time. This is right after all the different things. He says there's a time for this and a time for that. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. Yet so they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. He has put eternity into man's heart. God has given us, I believe what this is saying is that God has given us an intuition to know that there's more to life, that there should be more to life than chasing after wisdom, pleasure, happiness, being great, doing amazing things on this earth, self-indulgence. I think there's a realization inside of all of us. Have you noticed that when you try to be happy by chasing after those kinds of things, it feels good as you're chasing after you're doing all that striving like he was doing, and yet at the end, when you stop and look at it, it's like, yeah, it's empty. What good really is it? What meaning is there in what I've done? I think there's a intuition in all of us that knows that there needs to be more than that. What is that? What is that more that we're longing for, that we're desiring? Well, let's look at God's purpose for us, and I think that's where the answer is. If we go all the way back to the beginning in Genesis chapter 1, we see a big piece of why we exist, why we're here. And understanding why we're here is so critical. It's huge for helping us to be able to live within that purpose and to have meaning in life. It says in Genesis chapter 1 in verse 26, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness.'" God didn't just say, let's make something. And poof, here comes a man. Okay, that's okay. No, there was an intention about this creation that God created. He created you on purpose, and he created you for a purpose. You didn't happen by accident. And part of that purpose was, he said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. So a big piece of our purpose is to be that image bearer, to bring the image of God to the world, to show the world who Jesus is, who God is, and what he's like. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, Paul says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus." Now this is talking about, well, let's back up. So he created man in his image, but man sinned and messed up that what God had created to be. But God, in his goodness, he already knew that was going to happen, I believe. And he already had a plan. And he was willing to send his very own son to die and to buy back man so that we can again carry his image into the world. So that's where we pick up in Ephesians 2. We're his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, bought back into what we were originally created for in Christ Jesus. Why? For good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. For good works, to make us happy and comfortable. No. That's where we get sidetracked. When we continue to focus on trying to find things that make me happy and that make me comfortable, that's where we end up being where the preacher was in Ecclesiastes, looking back and saying, well, it was meaningless. 1 Peter 2, there's some more verses that stand out to me there in regard to this. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and 10 says, "But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." So why are we his possession? Why did he buy us back? For a reason, so that we can proclaim the excellencies of him who called us out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And it's for a reason. It wasn't just an accident. Romans 5, verses 2 and 3 says this, says, "Through him we have also obtained access by faith, into this grace in which we stand." So by Jesus, we've gained access by faith into the grace that we now live in, that bought back position that we live in. And we rejoice. There's joy. This is where we find joy in life. And this is joy that doesn't just last for a little bit and then we look back and say, that was empty. This is the joy that carries us forever, carries us into eternity. It says we rejoice in hope of what? What are we hoping in? That we can get more stuff? That we can be greater? That we can be happier? That we can be more comfortable? No. What is the hope? Someone tell me what the hope is. I want to make sure you're seeing it. What gives us hope? The glory of God. I am having a hard time grasping the fact that God is wanting me to carry his image into the world for his glory to be able to be seen by other people. Can you grasp that? Can you understand that? He's asking you. You have purpose in life, and your purpose is to show the glory of God. Can you do that? Are you able to do that? What do you think, Cora? There's a lot of wheels turning right now. And I don't know, are you having the same trouble that I'm having? I'm wondering what's going on in all your minds, because I see a lot of really interesting looking faces staring at me. Are you having the same trouble that I am comprehending the fact that God created me to carry his image for his glory? That's a lot. That's a lot to digest in 2 minutes. But that's what we're here for. And we have to understand, unless we want to be where he was at the end of our lives and look back and say, that was worthless. I wasted all that energy. I wasted all that time. I wasted all those things. For what? Now someone else is going to take my stuff and enjoy it. And what's more, that person might be a fool and might waste it. All that hard stuff, the stuff I worked hard for. No, there's more to it than that. But if we keep focusing on that, that's where we end up. And I'm afraid that's where too many people end up at the end of their lives. And they miss living in that hope, in that joy of being able to show the glory of God, to be a bearer of that image to the world. I'm going to leave it right there. I feel like that's kind of dropping right off really abruptly, because I'm like, how do I do that? How do I do that? But we don't have time to look at that. Plus, that's a really big subject. There's a lot of pieces to that. But for now, I'm going to suffice it to say, I want my focus to be on what I was created for, so that I can find meaning in life, and I can do that. I can fulfill that purpose that I was put here for, and that is to carry God's image, not myself. For whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? If it's for myself, then I'm going to end up where I don't want to be. What has your focus been? What is your focus right now? What will your focus be going forward? That's my challenge this morning. I'm going to give you one more quick opportunity if someone has something to share. I just feel like I should give that opportunity. Someone has something to share, stick your hand up.